Can you hear me?
1, 2, 3, שומעים?
1, 2, 1, 2. Can you hear me? Okay.
צהריים טובים, שרת
Good
העלייה והקליטה
afternoon,
פנינה תמנו שטה,
Minister of
תודה שאת
Aliyah and
איתנו.
Integration, Ms. Pnina Tameno Shete. Good afternoon to you and the distinguished guests, the entire audience.
מתבקש שנתחיל בחיבור
Well,
שבין הסיפור
we
האישי
should
שלך
probably
לבין
begin
תפקידך
with
היום כשרת
your
העלייה
personal
והקליטה.
story and your role as the
עליתי
Minister of
משפחתך
Aliyah and
במבצע משה
Integration. You
באמצע
came
שנות
to Israel in
ה-80, ואני רוצה לשאול
mid-1980s as
אותך,
part of Operation Moses.
מה השתנה
And I wanted
בתפיסת
to
המדיניות
ask
של
you,
ישראל
what has
בקליטת
changed
עולים
in terms of
מאז
Israel's view
ועד
on
היום?
how to
מה
absorb
המשמעויות של זה
immigrants,
ואיזה
olim,
הזדמנות יש
since
פה
then?
מבחינת
What kind of
קליטת עלייה?
opportunity do we have these days?
אז קודם כל צהריים
Well,
טובים.
first of all, good afternoon.
את יודעת, אני איכשהו לא
You know,
מצליחה בסוף
somehow
להתחמק
I
מהעניין
can
של
never
הסיפור
avoid
האישי, לא
this
שחלילה
matter of my personal
אני
story. And it's not as if
מתביישת בו,
I'm ashamed of it or
אבל גם נראה לי זה
anything, but I
מתקשר
think
באמת
it really
לנושא
is
שאנחנו
associated
דנים
with what
עליו,
we're talking
משברים
about
הומניטריים.
humanitarian crises
עלייה.
and in general
אם אנחנו
immigration.
ניקח את
If we look
ההיסטוריה
at
של עלייה
the
לישראל,
history of
אפילו לפני
Aliyah
קום
immigrating to
המדינה,
Israel, even before
ועד
the
ימינו
establishment of
אנו,
the State of
אנחנו
Israel, to
נראה
this day, we will see
שגורם העלייה,
that
הזרז
the
הגדול ביותר לעלייה
greatest
בסופו של
accelerator
דבר
or the
זה
greatest
שינויים
driver of
גיאופוליטיים,
immigration is
משברים
geopolitical changes,
הומניטריים.
humanitarian
אנחנו ראינו את זה
crises.
גם בעליות
We saw
הגדולות
it in
בשנות
the large
ה-90,
waves of
גם
immigration in
נפילת מסך
1990s,
הברזל,
obviously the
גם
Iron
העלייה
Curtain,
מאתיופיה, ובכלל
and
גם
the
כאשר
immigration from
הממשלה השיקה
Ethiopia, and
את
of course
צרפת
when
תחילה
government
ב-2015, אבל
launched
צריך
the
בהחלט לעשות
operation
הבחנה.
France
אבל
first.
לשאלתך,
So
מה
as for
נשתנה?
what you
אני
asked,
חושבת
what's
שכשיש
the
ידע
difference between
נצבר,
then and now? I think that when
ללא
knowledge is
ספק,
accumulated,
גם יש
without
יותר
a
כלים.
doubt, there are greater tools,
שאלת
there are
האם
more
כמה משתמשים באמת
available
בכלים, זו
instruments. The
שאלה
question is how
מאוד מאוד
many of them
טובה,
do you use and
אבל
to what
אנחנו כבר
extent?
לא
That's a
אותה
good
מדינה
question, but we're
קטנה
no longer the same small
שהייתה
country
צריכה
that
להיאבק עם
had to
המצב
struggle
הדמוגרפי
with demographics
והחולשה
and
של היישוב
the
היהודי,
weakness of the Jewish
ומעלים
yishuv, the
העיקר
Jewish
ליישב
population.
בכל
And
מקום,
you
בכל
know,
צריף,
the most
במעברות.
important thing is to
אנחנו כבר לא
have
המדינה
people
הזאת, אני
somewhere in
חושבת
the country,
שהמדינה
anywhere, putting
שקמה
them
בריצה,
wherever in the
היום
south, in
יש לה
the
את
north.
הזמן
It
גם
wasn't
באמת
that kind of
לתת את המקום
situation. It's
לטיפול
no longer
הוליסטי,
that way.
לקליטה
Now we can
הוליסטית.
have a holistic approach to immigration. And I think the greatest mistake that the Israeli society makes is to think that Aliyah and immigration are over. So I want to demonstrate with a few examples. Since COVID began, more than 70,000 have immigrated to Israel. In the last 3 years, 90,000, which means a whole city in Israel could have been populated in just the last 3 years. And I can tell you, for every missile, for every terror attack, for every security challenge with which we're grappling, my answer is more and more airplanes landing in Ben Gurion Airport. I have just come back from the Maccabiah exhibition, the opening of it, and these athletes such as Tal Brody are coming to Israel as part of a sports event and are then staying in Israel. And we now have like a small government. The Ministry of Aliyah is like a mini government because we engage in housing, education, health, so many things. And our ability, my ability as a minister and other ministers to make decisions is certainly an ability that is backed up by tools, by a reality that we knew how to grapple with in the past and we don't want to grapple with. For instance, when the crisis in Ukraine began, we talked about caravans. There were even people who suggested having a cruise out at sea that will populate these immigrants. So first of all, the immigrants, they have enough room. We don't need to put them in trailers and caravans. And even if we did have to do that, it wouldn't be the same caravans that I grew up in where you can't sit for half a minute because it's so hot in summer and it's so cold in winter. It was even better to get wet in the rain. I can tell you that I personally, since I began, I said I will not allow people to have caravan size of 1,000 and 2,000 caravans because we realized that it is better to absorb these immigrants because they are such a great lever, such a growth engine for Israel economically, internationally, in any aspect. It is integration, integration, integration by giving them the best tools possible. And I think that now we are in a much better situation when it comes to that. Okay. So, speaking of humanitarian crises, and the head of your party talked about how we have not seen the end of wars yet. we have a great
בין
event
אוקראינה
in
לרוסיה, שהולכת
Europe, a
כנראה
war between Russia
להימשך
and
זמן
Ukraine, which
רב,
seems
והנה
to
גם
have
הפינים
gone on
השבוע
for
כבר
quite a while
קיבלו
and will probably
איום
carry on.
לאור
And the
ההצטרפות
Finnish
שלהם
are
כנראה
also
לנאטו,
being
והשוודים,
threatened
ואנחנו
because
עוד
they want to
לפנינו
join
מערכה.
NATO, and so are the Swedes. And
והתחזיות
so there is
של
a long
הפליטים,
way
זאת אומרת, זה לא רק
ahead,
עולים,
and
אלא
the
יש פה גם את מרכיב
projections
הפליטים,
of not only
שכמובן
immigrants
לא
but
נמצא
also
בסמכותך באופן
refugees,
ישיר,
and
אבל
of course
כמדיניות
not
של
under
ממשלה
your
הולך להיות
direct
כבר.
authority, but as a
אירופה נמצאת,
government,
כפי
we're
שהאו"ם
already
מגדיר
there.
אותה,
Europe,
במשבר
as the
הפליטים
UN
הגדול
has
שתראה
said,
המאה
is in
הזו.
one of
איך
its
ממשלת ישראל, מה
greatest
ההשלכות של
refugee
ישראל מבחינת
crises. So what are the implications for
משבר
Israel in
הפליטים
terms of the
ההומניטרי
refugee
שמתרחש
crisis and
בעולם, ואיך
humanitarian
ישראל
crisis that's
נערכת
happening
לזה
around the world, and how is
בטווח
Israel
הרחוק?
preparing for it
אז
in the long term?
ראשית, אין
Well, first
פליט
of all,
במדינתו.
we don't
ואני
have
רוצה תחילה
refugees. You
להתייחס
can't have a
לזכאי
refugee
חוק
in your
השבות
own country.
והיהודים.
So I just want to talk about the right of return and the
ועדיין
Jewish
בתוך זה
aspect
אנחנו
of things.
ראינו אותם
Yet
בתחילת
within
הדרך
that, we
כפליטים,
saw them as
כי ללא
refugees
ספק
to start
הבריחה
off with,
של
because
העולים החדשים
these new
שמגיעים לישראל
immigrants, having
מאוקראינה, הם מגיעים
escaped
ללא
from
כלום.
Ukraine, they come with nothing.
הפליטות היא קשה.
They
אני
are
הייתי זמן קצר
refugees.
פליטה
I was a refugee for a very
בסודאן,
short time in
אבל עם
Sudan
מטרה
en
מאוד
route to
ברורה, עם
Israel,
הפנים
but I had a very
לישראל, אז זה
clear
באמת תחנת
vision of where I
מעבר
was going. I
עם
was
כל
on my way
ההשלכות
to
שבזה,
Israel, so it was only a
תמונה
transitory
לחלוטין, אבל גם היום כשאני רואה
stage.
את המראות
But
של
when I see
אימהות,
these images of
ילדים,
mothers and
ניצולי שואה
children,
שמגיעים אלינו ללא
Holocaust
כל
survivors who come here to Israel
מדיניות
without
שהיא
planning
לא
ahead, with
פשוטה, היא
nothing,
מורכבת והיא קשה,
it's very
אבל מרגע
difficult.
שהם
They didn't
נוחתים
plan ahead. But
בנתב"ג,
once they
אין
land in Ben
פליט
Gurion
בארצו,
Airport, we do
וכל
not have
יהודי, כל
refugees
זכאי
here
חוק
in Israel.
השבות,
Any Jew,
זו
anyone who comes
הארץ
here to
שלו.
Israel
לצד
by
שאלתך
virtue of the
לעניין
law
הפליטים,
and the right of
אני
return,
חושבת שאני לא
they,
מחדשת לאף
they are
אחד
no
דבר.
longer refugees. And I don't think I'm saying
ההתנהלות
anything
שלנו הייתה
new
לוקה
about our
בחסר,
conduct. Our conduct at the
ואני
beginning
אפילו
was
לא רוצה לדבר על
very
התנהלות עם
problematic. I don't even
אינטרסים.
want to
אני
talk
רוצה קודם
about
כל
the
לשאול
interests involved. I
אותנו,
want to
וזה
ask
כבר
ourselves
גם
already,
דברים
and that is something that is,
שהצבתי
of
בממשלה,
course, have been
על
talked about
הערכים
in
שלנו,
government.
על
We
מי
talk about our
אנחנו, גם
values, about who we
כיהודים,
are,
כמי
both as
ששואבים
Jews, as
את
those
ערכינו
who
מהתורה. אין שום
base
סיבה
our values
בעולם
in the
שאנחנו
Torah.
נהיה כל
There's
כך
no
חרדתיים
reason why we should
לדמוגרפיה
be so
היהודית, ושם כך
anxious
נטשטש
about
ערכים
Jewish
חשובים
demographics and
שהם
trample
בעצם מציירים את הפנים
values
שלנו
that are really
לאורך
our face
ההיסטוריה.
in history.
ולא רק אנחנו
And it's not just
לאומיים,
us.
או
It's not just in
לאומנים,
terms
או
of
איך
being
שלא תרצו
national
לקרוא
or
לזה.
nationalist.
גם האנשים שמגיעים
Those
מאוקראינה,
who come
אין
from
לי ספק
Ukraine, I think
שהרוב
without a doubt,
המוחלט
the
רוצה
vast majority
לחזור
of them
הביתה עם
would
תום
want to go
המלחמה.
back to Ukraine when the war is
ולכן ראוי
over. And
ונכון
therefore,
שנדע
the right thing
להתייחס
to do
לגר,
is to
לפליט
see
במקרה
them,
הזה.
these
נדע
refugees,
לדאוג שהם לא
to
מסתובבים
make sure they're
ברחובות.
not on the
עזבו רגע מה
streets.
שקרה
Forget
בשערי
about what
נתב"ג.
happened on
נדע
the
לתת
gates of
מזון,
Ben Gurion
מענה
Airport. We should give them
בדברים
food, we
בסיסיים,
should give them a
ביגוד,
solution
לתת
for
מתן אשרה
clothing,
זמנית
we should
לעבודה.
give them
הרי בסופו של דבר,
short-term
גם אם
visas so they
נסתכל על
can work,
אינטרסים
because
מהאינטרסים
if we
שלנו
look
זה
at these
שאנשים
interests, it is our
יהיה
interest
להם
that these
כלים
people will
לחיות,
have the tools to live,
לנשום,
to
בזמן
breathe
שהם בורחים
while they're
ממלחמה.
escaping
ואני
war.
חושבת
And I
שהדבר
think
הזה,
that this thing,
ובשיחות,
and in
זה איכשהו הפוך על
conversations,
הפוך.
it's kind of
שיחק
like
נגד מי ש-
reverse psychology.
ואני אומר את זה באופן בוטה,
I will
קצת
say it,
להתגזען על
that
הפליטים האפריקאים.
some have been about
כי האפריקנים לא קיבלו
there
בעצם
have been some
אשרות
racist
עבודה.
comments made about Africans because the
מה, עכשיו ייתנו
African
אשרות עבודה
immigrants didn't get
באופן
working
מגדיר ראש
visas.
מי
So
שאמונים
now
על
suddenly those
תחום
who are in
ההגירה.
charge of immigration will
רגע, אז
come
יש
and
עכשיו
say
פליטים
what? So now
מאוקראינה,
if we have
ניתן להם
Ukrainian
אשרות
refugees, we'll
אשרות
give
עבודה
them
עכשיו
working
לאוקראינים,
visas
אבל
now?
הפליטים
But
מאפריקה
when
אין
they were
אשרות.
refugees from Africa, they didn't get any
וזה
working
דילמות
visas, and these are
של,
huge dilemmas.
של חלמאות, כי
But
בסוף
it's
עוול לא
very
מתקן
silly
בעוול.
because you can't right a
למצוא
wrong with
פתרון
another
אמיתי.
wrong. You have to
צריך
find a
לאפשר
better
לאנשים
solution.
האלה,
You have to allow
כמו
these people,
שאמרתי,
as I've said,
ביטחון זמני,
temporary security, temporary safety. We need to respect ourselves, our heritage, and our Jewish values. And then afterwards, when the dust will settle, hopefully the war will be over, and also to allow them to return to their homes. As for the immigrants who have come, I think that today at midnight we will be reaching the 20,000 mark. It was a huge national operation, a great, tremendous effort made by my ministry and also the Ministry of the Interior. I can also say good things. And IDF soldiers who always knew to be part of this kind of mission of getting immigrants to Israel. They are working very diligently, and we should really thank them because they don't see their homes There are 40 hotels around Israel, and it's fantastic. It means that we know how to carry out large assignments if we want to, and we know how to carry out in practice the reason why Israel has been established to be a safe home for Jews in routine times as well as emergency times. Which leads me directly to the civil war in Ethiopia. Again, there's another humanitarian crisis. The Falashmuras are still left behind, and I now understand that the Supreme Court has removed all obstacles on the path to bringing them here. Will the Israeli government practice what it preaches in terms of the policy you've just described? The Israeli government, look, I am part of the government. I view myself, since I've come to Israel, since I've immigrated, the most Israeli person. No person would, seem to me more Israeli than me. I was raised that way by my grandfather and my family, who I view as really those keepers of the heritage of Judaism in the circumstances that were not easy in Ethiopia, but I must say very honestly and sometimes a bit brutally, and it doesn't make me less Zionist if I say that, and because I'm central right in terms of my political views, it doesn't mean I preserve the image of Israel less, but the immigration wave from Ethiopia has never been treated the same way as other waves of immigration, and this is the kind of righting of the wrong that I've been trying to do in my ministry. When people talk to me about culture, I talk about Zionism. When people talk to me about Zionism, it doesn't mean that I won't promote doctors and engineers and high tech and to really give the tools, but at the same time, first and foremost, when we talk about immigration, we talk about Zionism. And unfortunately, just as there have been huge battles in Ethiopian Jewry in the 1980s and 1990s, so the same is today. I feel that they are alone, they are fighting alone, and I am the only one fighting for it. On the way over, I received a video of a mother who is in Tigray with a child, and she is a skeleton, and these are not the kind of wars that we know. She is a skeleton, and her baby is on the brink of death. And when mothers come to me, and when there are protesters outside my house, I told them on this last Friday, come have coffee with me. And when a protester told me that a nephew of his had his father died during the operation to bring Ethiopian immigrants to Israel, and he said nobody's doing anything, or two elderly Israelis who left for Tigray before the war, but no one's heard of them. When do we hear? You hear about rescue operations, but they're stuck there and nobody's helping them out. And the camps in Gondar and Addis that need to be stopped, that need to be ended. So all that I bring to the government's table. I am backed up and supported by the head of my party. But I think it should have been something that was not a partisan issue, because that's what our image is all about. We should put an end to this saga, we should put an end to this pain. And I see that this loneliness is not only on the political front. I often hear reporters who have never met cousins or any family waiting for the family members, have never come to the home of Ethiopians, sit on the news and delegitimize and say that not a single Jew has remained in Ethiopia. Can anyone say that? That is so pretentious. And therefore I will continue fighting this battle. In 2 weeks' time, a plane will be landing, the first plane after many, many complex months with budget problems and the problem with the High Court of Justice. And we had also had a diplomatic crisis with Ethiopia because their crusaders didn't come in for Easter because of a few people who were illegal aliens. And I hope that together with the immigrants we will also provide a solution for the Beta Israel community from Tigray, who are Jews full-fledged through and through. Well, the clock is continuing with its strategy and ticking away, and I still have so many questions, but I do want to end on an optimistic note. So once the government completes its term in office, and I wish you that it will continue all the way to the end. What would be the dream that you would want to see becoming a reality as the Ministry of Aliyah and Integration? Wow, what a good question. I'm already living some of these dreams. I wanted immigration to be talked about. I didn't want immigrants to be transparent, but I do think there is a conversation, there is a dialogue happening because of geopolitical changes and because of wars, unfortunately, as well. But because immigrants are coming, and my dream is 1 million immigrants a decade. There's a good opportunity for that now. Yes, with all due respect, and I have a lot of respect for the diaspora Jews, and it's important for the connection to be strengthened, but I do want to create more and more drivers, and not only drivers, but incentives. We don't want incentives and drivers like anti-Semitism and wars and people escaping. There are several, there are quite a few immigrants that need to be triggered, that need to have a positive incentive. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to be creating these positive incentives. I talked about the Maccabiah before, so it's another great opportunity to really embrace the young Jewish generation from 80 countries around the world that are watching the games, that are being exposed to Israel, and then choose sometimes to also remain here, to immigrate to Israel. And then we can also we're going to have to solve the housing problem as well, but I think we can definitely do that if we have good steps in place. Thank you so much, Ms. Pnina Tameno Shete, Israeli Minister of Aliyah and Integration.